Opened a social network, found someone richer, smarter, healthier, better. How does automatic comparison with others turn on and lead to severe burnout, from which it's impossible to escape? How does automatic comparison turn off one's own motivation? And how to stop this race? An irreversible chain is triggered within your system. When your self-esteem decreases, when you start feeling apathy and anxiety, when you tremble here inside, and it becomes difficult, and you exacerbate it even more, entering a state of incredible irritability, heaviness, and loss of consciousness. And you continue to compare yourself even more, repeating the cycle every day, week after week, month after month. You guarantee not just burnout, you guarantee the loss of your own identity, your own life, the feeling of your own freedom, the feeling of your own development.
A person often finds themselves thinking that they are smarter, faster, richer. Why is the brain or a person inclined to compare? Why does this happen? No matter how much I engage in my spiritual development, and then there's the moment I feel like I'm all elevated and so on. And then, like a sudden blow, completely unexpectedly, comparison appears again. And you find yourself comparing yourself to others and realize that maybe everything was in vain or something else. And constantly compare, thinking someone is better, more beautiful, richer, and so on, come from.
Listen, this is a very powerful story and one of the most destructive stories for human development. In fact, social networks are strongly built on this. That is, if you take social networks, they are built on comparing yourself to another person. In this case, not just on comparison, but on juxtaposition, what you want to become. The key story when we talk about comparison is that as soon as you have the impulse to compare yourself with another person, it is always 100% your own ego. These comparisons, especially the ones you mentioned, are the ego inside. This internal weakness is expressed either in exaltation when you compare and say, I am definitely cooler than this guy, or it is expressed in an internal loss when you tell yourself, well, I definitely don't deserve this, I will never succeed. The very fact of the existence of doubt is destructive for a person and their entire system. And this is a stopping point in their forward development.
Envy. How is envy related to comparison? And does so-called white envy exist? Or is this useful comparison perhaps for development or maybe for something else? Or just white envy?
Envy is guaranteed and very often associated with comparison. Because if a person, not always is it related, yes. If a person compares themselves to someone else, then they may develop a feeling of envy. Often a person may compare themselves to another, and they may develop a feeling of worthlessness or dissatisfaction. It's not necessary to envy another person, not necessary. Just if this feeling of envy is added on top, and you, conditionally, you just said, no matter how much I do, suddenly a comparison is born, for example. If envy is added to this comparison, it's just a red flag. At this moment, it's important to understand that comparison with the construct of envy is just a disaster. It's a very big problem. Further, if I continue to speak, is there such a thing as benign envy in the sense that it's normal to envy another person? Of course not. Because when you envy another person, you want to have the same thing for yourself. You believe that you can have it, for example, that you deserve it, and that it somehow relates to you willingly or not. Well, probably people talk about white envy. This is when a person doesn't say that another person is undeserving, but I am deserving, right? This is such pure envy. A person will say, well, wait, the other person is deserving and I am also deserving. So I am purely with this.
I want that too.
Yes, I purely envy this. It is very important not to get lost in the impulse here. That is, if in this, can there be some reasonable impulse in this? There can be a reasonable impulse, but it is not envy. It is some understanding that you simply want to enter, for example, such a state. Or why not achieve such an event?
Why not learn from this person?
When is it reasonable? It is reasonable when you are calm about the fact that it will not happen.
Listen,
If we talk about probably, to answer your question, I would say that, okay, let this state be present under one condition. If you are very calm about the fact that you might not have it, if, as soon as the state arises that you must have it no matter what, that you deserve it no matter what, it is destructive.
So it doesn't matter that the feeling of comparison arises. It can arise, yes, the feeling of comparison and even the feeling of envy can come. What matters is probably how you react and what you do with it, right? Well, I mean, no, what is that?
You need to look at the source of comparison once again. You see, the thing is, when I take and say, I will compare company A and company B by their metrics in order to make the right decision and move forward, not to destroy someone, not to envy another company, and so on. These are, well, reasonable, simple things. If you are just comparing yourself from the perspective of another person, for example, you run and you compare yourself to how another person runs, and just to somehow compare how other people with the same build, the same age, I don't know, in the same region, on the same track run, well, that's no problem at all. But you were talking a little about a different kind of comparison. You were talking about the comparison you feel, again, I said from the very beginning, that you feel very often when scrolling, a person scrolling through their phone.
Or you meet a classmate and he bought a cool car.
Yes, or you meet a classmate, he bought a cool car, and you compare yourself, right? And you say, well, he bought a different car, but he's dumb, or he has a pimple there, or something else, right? I mean, starting with some of these contrasts are destructive. We're not talking about comparison. Look, in this video, we're not talking about normal, reasonable things of comparison. Well, I will compare this chair, the other chair, say this chair is brown and the other chair, so this one is white, and this one is gray, and this one is blue. This one costs $100, this one $1,000. Well, sure, compare like that as much as you want. We are now talking about comparison that causes strange internal emotions: aggression, anger, envy, resentment, anxiety, feeling self-flagellation, a sense of insecurity.
That's understandable. But how do you help yourself when something like that hits you? A person experienced it, maybe they didn't even want to. They might be trying somehow not to envy, but it can just hit and suddenly you have that feeling.
The simplest step is to be able to perceive this situation calmly and neutrally. There are different stages of perception. For example, when you are driving a car passes by. You cursed at this person for making a mistake. You came home and told your husband or wife, friends about it. You said he's an idiot and even made a voodoo doll of him, stuck a dart in it. This is one stage, yes, of complete unawareness of what is happening in life. Yes, there was a comparison. You compared everything completely, said, I hope he dies, I want this too. And then you drank to it indeed. And on the goal board, you put comparison, and there a cross was drawn for the person, right? There is the next stage of comparison when the same thing happened, but when you got home, you realized that maybe you shouldn't do that, right? There is the next stage of comparison. You are driving, swearing at this person, and while you are swearing, you realize that you shouldn't do that. There is the next phase. You are driving, realizing you shouldn't do that. You argue because you can't hold back. But you have already kind of realized in advance that you shouldn't do it. And the next stage, you are driving, understand you shouldn't do it, and you don't argue. Here is an important aspect. I didn't mention it for nothing. It's clear that you can probably break it down into some micro stages, right? What I mentioned here is the story of comparison. And this task is to move from the stage of simply calmly observing that you are doing it and acknowledging that it is wrong. The basic story that people do is they see it and say, well, like here I compared normally because he really is a jerk, but here I compared abnormally, right? So the most important component is the calm acknowledgement that this is basically a mistake, and that's it. This is basically a mistake. If it's not a comparison of two chairs with each other, but if it is a comparison of two chairs with each other, your chair and the chair your wife or husband chose, and you say, well, my wife chose crap, I chose a normal one, that of course would be a mistake.
Well, so it's clear there is a non-constructive reaction to seeing that other people have something different, like some kind of envy or comparing oneself to others. There is a non-constructive reaction. Okay, a person has learned, as you say, at least to notice it, observe, understand that it's wrong. And what should he transform it into? After all, it doesn't arise for no reason. What should he transform this comparison into? Can it be turned into some kind of positive motivation, a positive impulse? How to react to this constructively? How to react to this differently? Can comparing yourself to others have, well, a different unfolding algorithm?
You can expand this algorithm from the perspective of development. That is, on one hand, I mentioned that you can observe it, you can expand it, that when the process of comparison occurs, start studying it. Why did this happen to me? That is not to go towards observation, but towards study, reflection. Why did I compare myself at this moment in time? What do I really want to do? What do I want to change? How do I want to harm another person? Do I really want to harm another person and change my model, change my actions at that moment? I see that with comparison, I want to harm the person, to do something useful for them, to write them a good comment or say some good things, or on the contrary, help him achieve even more, help him strengthen his own result even more, help strengthen even more. This is a very strong, good transformation through action.
How to stop devaluing your achievements compared to others. After all, you might have something cooler, even your car might be cooler, or something else might be cooler. But you see it in another, and you've already devalued your own. Well, like the grass is always greener on the other side, right? So what? How to deal with this?
Look, devaluation in this case, from the point of view of comparison, well, it also comes as a result, including as a result of comparison, but devaluation is not necessarily based on comparison. Of course, there are other reasons for devaluation. But if we say that a comparison occurred, devaluation occurred, observing all these stories, comparisons, simply noting this observation will remove the state of one's own insecurity. Once again, increased activity in studying other people, comparing with them, discussing these people, envy towards these people, the desire to change these people, the desire to change oneself, amplifies the state of one's own insecurity, simply amplifies the state of one's own insecurity. It's very difficult. That is, even if due to your work you have to study a large number of people and compare them, this will also create an internal state of self-doubt. It's very hard, it's very hard.
Right in the moment, here and now, a person is overwhelmed by envy, like a wave, right? So what exactly should they do? Some short technique, some practice, or something else?
If a person is overwhelmed by envy right now, the first thing to say and do, look, it's important, a very important aspect. If a person is in a state of any disoriented emotion, this exalted joy or exalted sadness, or in a state of envy, or in a state of such depression, very severe, it's important to, there is a fundamental solution, just a fundamental solution. At this moment, the first thing to say to yourself is, I am not aware, I do not perceive. From this state, from being in such a state, it is impossible to analyze the situation. More precisely, any analysis of the situation will lead to a mistake. Anyone, because it initially contains a narrowed perception within itself. This is number one, simply number one, the fundamental basis that exists. And the first thing to do is to pause a little. That's why I often say, if you had a fight at home, wait 30 minutes. If you argued with someone else, wait 20 minutes. If you're at work in a meeting and you're shaking and feeling bad, at least go to the restroom. Discharge is often needed. Acting from a state of any complexity of anger, apathy, irritation, doubt, fear, you act from a state of narrowed perception. First, you need to enter a state of expanded perception. How to enter a state of expanded perception, I talk about it in many places. I talk about it here in videos on YouTube. I talk about it in the Vostok group that I have, where people come. I talk about it in different places. About entering a state of perception and calmness. It's important to understand that entering a state of perception of calmness can be resolved in 10 minutes for some people. For others, it may take years to stabilize and calm down in any way. There are simple methods, simple ones. You can stand up, jump 30 times, you can listen to music for 10 minutes, you can switch, call another person, talk to them, you can sit for 20 minutes, just sit straight like this, just sit straight. There are different ways. At least somehow switch. In general, the very fact of diagnosing such a state in oneself is an incredible key to freedom and an incredible key to not being in such states at all. not being in the states we are discussing today, never being in it at all, not present,